In the 10th chapter of Matthew, at the end of a long set of instructions about how his disciples are to go out into the world, avoiding at all costs Gentiles and Samaritans, Jesus says, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me." He expects all of us in the Jesus movement to put themselves in the way of the gift of another's generosity, of another's welcome. And when that welcome is offered, it will be as if Jesus himself has received it. Whoever welcomes. Whoever welcomes. In Greek, dikomenos means to receive. So whoever welcomes receives. Whoever welcomes you welcomes and receives me. Whoever welcomes and receives me welcomes and receives the one who sent me. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, Jesus says, none of these will lose their reward. 3 short verses. How can we get a 10-minute sermon from 3 short verses? These verses, though, are chock full of wisdom and a call to you and to all of us, to the church throughout the ages. It is all about holy hospitality. It is what we give and receive, all done for and in the name of Jesus the Christ. It is how we are to respond to the abundance of what God has done and given us. Now, I'm not one that quotes Billy Graham in sermons very often, so you might want to write this one down. Billy Graham used to preach and say, God has given us 2 hands, one to receive with and the other to give with. A powerful image for this text from Matthew today. When God places someone in our lives as a thirsty guest, as a lonely stranger, or as a little one in need, we care for what and whom God places right in front of us, for those whom God cares and loves and calls us to do the same for. And our radical response to God's abundance to us helps unveil God's grace to the rest of creation. And the really amazing thing about sharing and living in the abundance and hospitality of Jesus is that we simultaneously experience and receive other people and the rest of creation while they reveal God's grace to us. Welcoming Christ into the simple work of our hands and the movement of our hearts and entire bodies, we become hosts of God's grace for all we encounter. I think the Irish understand this particularly well. And that's not just because I'm married to Kathleen Ann Kelleher. Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes. It seems to say it all. It proclaims that each and every time we gathered, we are welcomed by our good and generous God. It's an expression of hope. Hope that we will always be welcoming. Hope that when we encounter others, we will be a conduit for God's grace. And it's a reminder that when we receive and share what God has given to us, it is a sacred encounter. It is an opportunity to glimpse and experience the holy. This happens when we realize that our time and our hospitality, our money, and all of the other blessings that we have ultimately belong to God. These gifts we've received are not up to us to hold on to and hoard, or to judge to whom is worthy of them, or to dole out as we see fit. Beloveds, we are simply conduits for grace, conduits to freely welcome and give what never can belong to us. Remember, even the word welcome means to receive in Greek. It blurs the line between host and guest. And while a host might give hospitality and shelter, food and drink, they also receive the sacred gift that is the guest. And what's being exchanged in this transaction is nothing less than the very presence of God. I think that we're all invited to be both host and guest, recipient and the means of God's grace. This is our call throughout our entire life, because we are Christ's guests, receivers of his gracious welcome. This gift of Christ comes full circle as we become Christ for the neighbor who is Christ for us. Now, this isn't always easy or even fun, and in her book, Dakota, a book I've quoted from before, Kathleen Norris shares a story. The story is said to start in a Russian Orthodox monastery out in the middle of nowhere. It's a story of an older monk sharing his wisdom with a younger one. He says, "I have finally learned to accept people as they are. Whatever they are in the world, a prostitute, a prime minister, it's all the same to me. But sometimes I see a stranger coming up the road and I say, 'Oh, Jesus Christ, is it you again?' Norris says, my neighbor in all of her neediness is Christ for me. She may exasperate and exhaust me. Oh, Jesus Christ, is it you again? And surely my impulse to fix things, to do good, to do something will kick in, for good or for ill. But how do I find the freedom and risk the vulnerability to expose my own neediness to another? To risk exasperating and exhausting another? To receive another's welcome such that they have received Christ in me. This week, I learned that the town of Milton, not all that far south from us, no longer has a food pantry. I've really wrestled with this. I don't know the backstory. I don't know any of the details, but I saw a notice, a written notice, and then I saw a posting online. It directed the residents to use the Wakefield or Farmington pantries for their needs. And then I saw a particular post from the Wakefield food pantry that noted that they would welcome Milton residents who qualify for food distribution. Now, to qualify, one must meet income or USDA guidelines. One might be living solely on Social Security or receiving state benefits, according to officials. But documentation is required. You must show your proof of income, your proof of residency, and have a photo ID. I have to admit that my first reaction was a bit selfish. I wondered about what kind of an impact this might have on our own life ministries here in Wolfboro that continues to grow in terms of the number of guests that we serve, the number of people that we feed on a weekly, monthly, and annual basis. I wondered, would we have enough? And then I wondered about why the Milton pantry closed and how many little ones might go hungry. In that online forum, a person replied to Wakefield Food Pantry with a question. They said, as a homeless person living out of my car, how am I supposed to be able to show proof of residency? How will I be able to feed my family and myself? A reminder of the gospel for this day. And I'm reminded that whenever we make the work of spirituality and holiness a matter of following the rules, we've missed the mark. For Jesus, the spiritual way of living is all about, well, you know what it's all about. It's about feeding the hungry. It's about clothing the naked. It's about housing the homeless. It's about giving someone a cold cup of water on a hot day. Really no more complicated than that. Jesus shares that welcoming is receiving. A cup of cool water splashes the abundance of God's living water, water that we first experienced in baptism. And in that splashing, there are 3 God-centric ripples in that water that flow in those holy encounters. First, when a follower of Jesus is received, means that Jesus is received, means that God our Father and Creator is received. This Trinity includes not only Jesus' incarnation, his humanity in the midst of that living water, but ours too, yours and mine, personally and communally. We are Jesus' body splashing and rippling out into the world. We share our lives as the baptized in all 3 God-centric ripples. And we're invited each day to splash in God's abundance, to share in this living water, to welcome and to receive. Beloved, splash in those ripples. But be aware that many of us who are northern New Englanders may not be welcome to that water. We may put up our hands and not want to dip our toes into it. No, I don't need any help. I'm fine, thanks, is what most of our neighbors might say. May you be aware enough. May you be tuned in enough to know the real needs of those who hunger and thirst, whom Jesus puts in front of you. You be sensitive enough and welcoming enough for you to give them that cup of cold water without doing it for you, without infringing on their pride or dignity. May you be Christ for your neighbor, who is Christ for you.